Hello, hello, and welcome to KHTS Radio. You are joining me, Jade Aubuchon, co-news director for the KHTS Newsroom, and I'm here today with Denise Lite, who is a candidate for the Santa Clarita City Council and is currently working as a nonprofit leader in the Santa Clarita Valley and a family legal advocate. How are you doing today, Denise?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's a little bit too warm.
Yes, the monsoon weather yesterday was kind of interesting and fun. I enjoyed that, but holy cow, it is hot and humid today.
You're a trooper for wearing a jacket. It looks great.
Well, thank you. Only inside, of course.
So let's just get a little bit of an overview of who you are. We've met before. Anybody who's active in the Santa Clarita scene knows who you are, but why don't you give us an introduction?
Well, I've lived in Santa Clarita for the last 13 years. I moved out here when I started dating my now husband, John Light. It's funny because when I first started coming out to Santa Clarita, I was living in Woodland Hills, and I felt like the drive to Santa Clarita was like driving up to Oregon. I was like, where is this place, and how long is it going to take me to get there? So I've been out here. I moved out here 13 years ago. I am a partner in my own family law firm, DeCourcy Placencio. We have three offices, Woodland Hills, Valencia, and Las Vegas, and we do family law and civil litigation, and I'm the managing partner. And I'm also very involved in Santa Clarita Philanthropies. I've celebrated my 8-year anniversary with Sir Optimist International of Valencia last night, and I've served on the board for that organization for many years. I've chaired Bras for a Cause. I sat on the board for Single Mothers Outreach. And so when I moved out here, I didn't know how to meet people, so volunteering was my avenue into learning the ropes about the city and meeting really great people.
Yeah, one of the things I think that we hear all the time that people really, really love about Santa Clarita is if you want to, you can really get involved in that almost small town aspect of everybody. If you're involved with the nonprofit scene, everybody knows everybody.
Yes, for sure. And it's a benefit to the community. It's great for business development. I mean, I didn't know a single person out here when I moved out here, and now if you ask somebody in Santa Clarita who do they need for a divorce attorney, my name comes up inevitably. So you do it because you want to help people and you want to meet people, but there's side benefits too to help grow a business.
Oh, absolutely. So you've been in the Santa Clarita, or at least familiar with the Santa Clarita Valley for about 13 years. What changes have you seen in the valley over time? Obviously, there's growth.
Right. Lots of growth, massive amounts of developments, which I think personally is good. I want there to be enough housing out here so my children and grandchildren can live out here. Obviously, it has to be sustainable. There has to be enough water. There's all kinds of things that go into that. But I think growth is positive. It brings jobs, so definitely growth. I've also seen not so great things. Like, I look back in time and I look at the Valencia Mall, and it's just so sad to me. It's just taken a dive. I personally can't even shop there. And I see a lot more storefronts that are empty, and that's nothing really particularly to fault the city with. COVID had a very decimating impact on businesses, but I definitely see a lot more empty storefronts and retail space that I would like to see revitalized and be built back up again because, we lost a lot of great businesses with COVID, and hopefully we've turned that corner and we can bring them all back eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially with the recent news that I think it's Westfield that is potentially pulling out of American Holders. So we'll see what happens with our mall over in the next year or so.
Yeah, I mean, you think of a mall as like the bright light on the hill, the beacon
It's
into
the
the
heart of
city center.
suburbia.
Right, it's the heart of the city center, and it's just so sad. And if I had my magic wand, I'd make it look like the Village at Topanga or the Americana. Have a lot of outdoor space, entertainment space, but something really needs to be done with it. First of all, it's a prime piece of property. Let's not get it twisted.
No, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's a great piece of property. But second of all, there could be so much more done with it. Although I am excited that a new company is going into the mall. I think it's called Nine Pin or Nine Round or something.
Something like that, yeah.
It's an arcade entertainment center with bowling and karaoke and darts and pool, and I think that's a great addition, and hopefully that will spur new business to come into the mall.
No, absolutely. I'm still heartbroken from when they removed the Stargate to the entrance of the Hot Topic several years back. It's just not the same without it.
And it's also not the same without the merry-go-round. Do you remember the
No, of
merry-go-round?
course. I remember when the merry-go-round was outside.
Oh, see, I don't remember it when it was outside. I remember when it was inside at the
Over
far
by
end.
where Red Robin was.
Right, exactly. So yeah, things change, and maybe the merry-go-round wasn't the best thing, but it's nostalgic and fun to think about.
I grew up on that merry-go-round. It's special to me.
Nice.
So, thank you so much for that trip down memory lane, first off.
You're welcome.
I grew up here, and I always loved talking about the history of Santa Clarita in any way, and that was it's a very special place to me. Now, everybody has obviously been very focused on like federal issues, state issues. You're looking at more of a local seat. What are some of the larger issues that you're hearing about that are affecting Santa Clarita, and what's some of your perspective on them? We could talk about the gas tax. We could talk about any of these larger issues that you'd like to dial in on.
Well, starting on a local level for city council, a lot of people, when I talk to them, their number one concern is the safety of their families. They want to be able to walk down the street. They want to be able to walk down Main Street here and not have to look over their shoulder or worry about who's walking up behind them or who's lurking around a corner. Safety is a very big issue, and we need to make sure that we are fully supporting the Sheriff's Department and supporting Catherine Barger's efforts to help keep our city safe. Our Sheriff's Department right now is understaffed because of retirements and layoffs and all kinds of things, budget cuts. And to me, public safety is the number one priority. Along with that, on a local level too, right now what's really happening is this Recall Gascon effort. A lot of citizens are really getting behind that and getting signatures because of the public safety aspect. And, a couple days ago, those 2 El Monte police officers were shot and killed. And so, those are the things that I hear people talk about when I'm talking about city council. On a much larger level, the gas tax, when we all went up to Sacramento 3 weeks ago, we were sitting in there hearing, presentations by various speakers and the problem with the gas tax. And that very day, as we're sitting in the room, the legislators voted to raise the gas tax again. And it was just so shocking to me. You would think that elimination of the gas tax would be the greatest accomplishment of the governor. I mean, wouldn't he make every Californian super happy by eliminating the gas tax? So you have to wonder why he's not doing that, right? You have to ask yourself, this would make him so popular to eliminate this. Why isn't he behind this? And so, yeah, gas tax in Sacramento when we were sitting there was quite astounding.
Yeah, and just to clarify, you're also talking about earlier you mentioned County Supervisor Catherine Barger, and she's been a really big supporter, thankfully, of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, which is the public service protectors that serve the Santa Clarita Valley.
Right.
Which, thankfully, our Santa Clarita Valley has an amazing station, with Captain Justin Diaz and all of the men and women who serve our area, but they are definitely strained in terms of dealing with our area. Yes, we're the 13th safest city in America according to some rankings.
Right.
But I report on crime. Mm-hmm. I get to see how many people are arrested every day. Mm-hmm. We could do better.
Well, and it's also amazing that they're doing such a great job being so severely understaffed. I mean, imagine the job that they could do if they were operating at full capacity. Mm-hmm. And, they have a very tough job. There are many people in this country, unfortunately, that have this anti-police type movement behind them or belief. But we are very, very lucky here to have such dedicated men and women serving the Sheriff's Department. And like you said, the captain is great. He's always out at public events. He is always accessible. If you have a concern, he is not hard to find. And that's pretty unique. I feel like we are very lucky, and to think that you could go into any other city in this state and go sit across the dinner table from the captain of your Sheriff's Department, probably not likely.
Yeah. And I'm just going to emphasize once again, we're the 3rd largest city in Los Angeles County, and I think the 17th largest in the state by population. There's not many cities of our size. I think we're actually in the top 100 largest cities in the nation now that can claim that.
Right. And it's truly remarkable. The city has its pluses and its minuses, but overall, it's a great place, and I most of the time, 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, I feel safe here. And, speaking of that, that's one of the reasons why I decided to run for city council. I don't know if you've ever heard the story, but
I haven't.
a couple of years ago, I started paying attention to politics. Everybody watches politics on a national level. Who are they going to vote for president? Those types of things. And not until recently do I really feel like people started paying attention to school board, water board, city council, because nothing really that happens in Washington affects our daily lives compared to what we do here on a local level, whether it's traffic signaling, synchronization, or crime prevention, parking, what our children are reading and learning about. The local elections far more impact an individual's daily life than what happens in Washington, D.C., even though the Washington, D.C. aspect somehow seems to get all of the attention and seems much more glamorous.
Those are the big ones, but nobody pays attention to local elections. You can even see it in our most recent round of primaries.
Right.
I mean, the number of people who voted in the primaries for our new assembly member and our new congressperson was negligible compared to the number of actual voters in the Santa Clarita Valley.
And it's truly shocking because you would think to yourself, in light of the last 2 or 3 years, you would expect voter turnout to be off the hook. And I don't know if it's apathy or if it's they think, oh, my neighbor will take care of it, or everybody else is voting, or we don't have election integrity, so it doesn't matter what I do. Like, who knows what goes through people's minds? But even if you feel all of those things, even if you feel like your vote doesn't count, you should still go do it. Just go do it anyways. You know what I'm saying? It's 15 minutes out of your day. It's popping an envelope in the mail, whatever you have. But yeah, the lack of voter turnout is sad, and it's scary because lots of things can happen when voters are not paying attention.
Yeah, you were just about to share with us your own story, which kind of launched you into focusing on public infrastructure and election.
So I started paying attention to local politics about 4 or 5 years ago, when I started hearing and seeing things that I just thought, wow, this is crazy making. And I decided to volunteer for a campaign, which was great. But it wasn't until last summer, it was a Thursday afternoon, I had a little bit of a break in my schedule, and I drove over to Ulta on McBean, and I pulled into the parking lot, and I got into the parking lot, and something came over my body that said, don't go in there. And this was a Thursday at 2 p.m. Okay. And I thought to myself, how disgusting and shocking is it that on a Thursday at 2 p.m., I don't feel comfortable going into Ulta? Now, there's a reason why I didn't feel comfortable going into Ulta, because it's been hit many times and robbed. And despite them having the sheriff's car parked out there in various different locales, I don't think that's fooling anybody. But I've never had a feeling of danger pulling up to someplace. And I thought, this is ridiculous. This is where I live. This is where young teenage girls go to get makeup, and they go with their friends and hang out and try new things. I shouldn't, if I feel unsafe here, what about younger girls? And that was my moment. I was like, okay, I have to do something. Now, I'm not going to solve the world's crime problems, but at least I will have a voice, and I will be able to express my preferences and thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, it was very sad. It almost became a little bit of a bingo card for us in the media, and even talking with other members of the media. Every time Ulta would get hit, which was sometimes, especially during parts of the pandemic when there was a lot of other things that the police were having to deal with, Ulta would get hit multiple times a day or multiple times a week, to the point where we as the media would hear that address on Magic Mountain Road and we go, it's Ulta. It's Ulta.
Yeah, and I even remember, to your point, I remember one day it got hit 3 times in one day.
3 times.
And my first thought was, is this a typo? Like, this can't be accurate, right? And so I waited a couple hours, and I went back, and I looked at the news site again, and sure enough, it was 3, and I was like, holy moly. Those poor employees,
Yes.
I mean, talk about having post-traumatic stress disorder. When I was 16, I worked at Ralph's Grocery Company. I was a cashier in Sherman Oaks, and I was robbed at gunpoint, and it was one of the scariest, most traumatic events. Like, even today, if I see somebody wearing, like, if it's a hot summer day and I see somebody walking down the street with a trench coat, my immediate thought is, watch out, So, the Ulta thing spurred my decision to get involved.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I know we've talked a lot about public safety. Are there any other particular points that stand out to you as being something you would want to focus on if you're elected?
Yeah, there's lots of things that have my attention. Public safety being one of them. I don't know that COVID is gone forever. I think it's around to stay, whether we like it or not. I'd like to see more distinct game plans about what we're going to do and how we're going to handle managing another pandemic when it comes to closure of businesses, business operations. We can't afford to lose more businesses like we did before. And while the county controls most of those rules and regulations, like you said, we are a large city and we are a very powerful city, and we need to use our voice a little bit better and a little bit stronger, in my opinion. So having systems and plans in place is another thing that I really want to make sure that we keep our eye on the ball, because it's one thing if you get caught with your pants down one time, it's another if it happens a second time. And so we don't want to be in that same position a second time.
Oh, absolutely. Now, we spoke a little bit earlier. You're a family legal advocate. You're an attorney
Yep.
in normal person speak.
Right.
What does that legal expertise bring to the table as a member of local government?
It brings a lot to the table. The city has a lot of decisions to make. Most recently, about a month ago, they decided to settle the California voting rights lawsuit that was brought against the city. And having a legal background and more importantly, being in litigation. I was in civil litigation for 8 years prior to being a family law attorney. And what that did is that it required me to analyze the risks of loss and the benefits, if any, of litigation. And a lot of times people want to fight until they understand what potentially is at stake. And having a legal mind to assess the risk reward, assess the possibilities. Would I have liked that CRVI lawsuit to be litigated? Yes. Do I think the city could have won that? Yes. Would it have cost us potentially tens of millions of dollars to fight that? Yes. And there's a similar lawsuit in Santa Monica that's happening right now that's actually in front of the California Supreme Court, called PICO Homeowners Association versus the City of Santa Monica. And if the City of Santa Monica loses that lawsuit, they will be forced into involuntary bankruptcy.
Wow.
Yeah. Who wants a bankrupt city? Our city has done a very good job at having a balanced budget. Our city has done a very good job at keeping its finances in order. And to go through a litigation process that could potentially bankrupt you is not smart. And so I'm glad the city settled it. But more importantly, as a lawyer, I know how to advocate for my clients, but I also know how to find common ground. I also know how to think outside the box. I also know how to reach compromise when compromise is needed, or to hold my ground when holding my ground is needed. So I do think it brings a lot to the table. Being a lawyer is not easy. It requires a solid work ethic. It requires attention to every single detail, big or small. And I don't think there's any company or entity that couldn't benefit from that.
That was a very well put answer. So first off, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I know that legalese tends to scare people sometimes because they don't understand it. There is some things that are more complicated than they should be. So I think that will definitely be a benefit to anybody you decide to work with.
Yeah, and in the family law realm, I have to reconfigure people's families. I have to reconfigure their finances. I have to reconfigure their real estate. So you have to know a lot about a lot of different areas. You have to know finance, investment, real estate, child development, adult personality disorders. You have to understand a lot, and a lot of those types of things can come into city business, and just really knowing how to relate with people. It's funny because when I went to college at CSUN, I delayed taking speech because I was shy and I didn't want to talk to people. And now I think about that about myself, and I just crack up because I'll talk to anybody who wants to talk, But you have to be able to listen and exchange. It's not just talk until you plow somebody over, right? You have to have an exchange where ideas come and go. And quite honestly, some of my best solutions in cases have come where I've really listened to the opposing attorney, because I wanted to figure out what their need was, right? If I could meet the need, then I could figure out the rest. But you got to figure out what the need is first.
I could definitely see that being very helpful in some city council meetings.
Yes,
Absolutely.
for sure.
So we mentioned it a little bit earlier, our trip up to Sacramento. That
Mm-hmm.
was the KHTS Sacramento bus
My
trip.
first one.
My first one as well,
Oh,
because this was technically our 2020 trip. However, it was a little bit delayed.
I wonder why.
We got to see a lot of super cool things. Unfortunately, we weren't able to see the Capitol building
Mm-hmm.
this year. But what were some of your takeaways?
That was my very first trip, and I was super excited to go. I would encourage anybody who has an interest in their personal and family well being to take a trip up to Sacramento to see how it works. Because let me tell you something, I know that I knew going into that trip that Assembly members Lackey and Valadares had a tough job. But it wasn't until I got up there and I realized that these two are essentially steelhead salmon swimming upstream in a river, and they are like just trying to hold on to the bulwark against complete chaos. They have an incredibly tough job, and they both do it with grace. They both do it with fire in their bellies. What is happening right now in Sacramento was literally eye dropping to me, especially when I heard the fellow. I'm not sure if you were in the room. You probably were. The fellow that talked about the gasoline production and standards in California versus the
Yes.
importation of gasoline from Ecuador and the destruction of the rainforest in order to meet that end. Like, that to me is craziness. And he made so much sense to me that I felt like this guy shouldn't be going into the House chambers talking to legislatures about all this because there's a Democratic supermajority. So he's just hitting his head against a brick wall up there. But he should be going to the people. Forget spending your efforts with the legislators. You're not going to change their minds. They are who they are. But go out into the people and to the towns and in Kern where they produce gas and tell them all of this stuff. And their eyes will pop open like mine and go, what are we doing? And get the people to rise up. Get this out there in the media. That's the only way you're going to change legislatures' minds.
Yeah, it all comes back to local movements and local government.
Right.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's definitely worth it to say that both Assembly Member Suzette Valadares, who is our
Right.
representative, and Assembly Member Tom Lackey, who is up in Palmdale but has a reach down to Agua Dulce,
Right.
they both do a lot of bipartisan work as well.
Yes. Well, if they don't, what's their option? I mean, they have to, or else nothing will get done. And there's a time and a place for everything, but I applaud their efforts in trying to do that. Otherwise, it would be just a quagmire of nothingness. So good for them.
Yeah, it was very educational. I'm glad I got to go. I hope I'll see you at the next one.
Oh, for sure. You'll see me at the next one. I inquired the other day because I am going to go on the Washington, D.C. trip too. Yeah, I'm really excited for that. And like I said, the Washington, D. stuff, it's great and it's big and it's sexy and it's all of that stuff. But local politics is really what affects us here daily.
Absolutely. Speaking of local politics, where can people find you?
They can find me at electdeniselite.com. That's my website. You can find information about our upcoming events. We will have a big 4th of July float in the parade on the 4th of July. You can sign up to be one of our walker volunteers. You can read my message. You can donate. All kinds of information on the website. Again, electdeniselite.com.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us,
Yes.
Denise. It was great to get to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
All right, and this is Jade Aubuchon with KHTS Radio, and I was speaking today with Santa Clarita City Council candidate Denise Lite. For more information, you can visit her website at electdeniselite.com. And if you want more information on KHTS Radio and all other Santa Clarita news, you can head on over to hometownstation.com.
No